Hello, everyone. Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday to you all. I was getting ready to go to the store to do some shopping, and I wanted to come on here really quick because I wanted to share something that just was on my mind this morning. So yesterday, I posted something about speaking to our children about sexuality. And if you saw that post, you saw that, hopefully you saw where I was going with it. But I wanted to come on here because I know that there are at least 20 or more people in our group, 20 or more sisters in our group. So obviously there are about 20 plus other opinions floating around. And I'm really curious to know how you feel about this. You know, I believe that it's an important conversation. And if you are shying away from sharing your perspective on it because maybe you feel that it's not a popular perspective, or maybe your position is not popular, or maybe, hi Leilani, how are you? Or maybe you do not agree with my perspective. It's okay. And I want you to really feel safe here. Your opinions are always safe here. They're respected, they're valued. And there's great value, you know, in our ability to have these conversations as women. And that's what I am trying to encourage. I think that being open and comfortable enough to discuss this is important because it involves a big part of our womanhood, our ability to nurture our children, so that they too can have healthy relationships when they get older. So, you know, I'm very passionate about having these conversations and opening it up for you all to share without embarrassment or shame. That's really important. Now, in regards to my post, I am not suggesting at all, you know, that our children be sexually active as soon as they start puberty. That obviously is not what I'm suggesting. I'm a mother, and I recognize that it is a tricky subject to navigate with our kids, you know, to have that balance. But what I do believe is that we really need to be a little more realistic and holistic in our efforts to engage them in a conversation, you know, that involves what's actually going on in their bodies. And so they need more from us. They need to hear more than the risk and the dangers perspective. Okay, if we want them to be able to function as emotionally mature adults, you know, the typical rite of passage for teens in the Western world, in our society today, in this part of the world anyway, is for them to get permission to operate a 3,000-ton car, a vehicle. Okay, that's kind of like the rite of passage for teenhood. And when I think about that, and then I compare it to the other things that we could be also giving them, not that giving them the right to drive a vehicle is harmful. I mean, it could be dangerous, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective as a parent. There's so much more in addition to that we could be giving them as a rite of passage, passing on to them tools that are going to be so much more valuable. How are you doing today, Leilani? Thank you for joining me. I hope you're having a good day, honey. And so we give them the keys to a car, you know, and we feel some type of way about talking to them or having them being able to operate their own vessel, their bodies. We don't even want to talk about it. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. When I was in my late teens, I hid my first sexual experience from my mother. She found out because she went through my drawer and she found some suppositories. Okay, hey Shama. And even when she confronted me, you know, she was showing me, look what I found in your drawer. What's this about? I lied to her and I told her I just had them just in case, but that I'd never actually used them. And obviously that was a lie. And I feel sad, you know, in retrospect when I think about that. But I don't feel sad that I chose to experience sex. That's not what I mean. I feel sad that I had to hide it from my mother because I didn't feel that she would be able to understand. It's not a conversation that she would feel comfortable with without, blowing up on me. And so I think that's really important, for me now as a mother, as I relate to my children. My mother and I, she wasn't comfortable enough in her womanhood to be able to have those conversations with me. We never spoke about healthy sexuality or healthy relationships. When I first got my menstrual cycle, the extent of her education from me was, you can get pregnant now, right? That was it. That's all I had. Just the awareness that I'm bleeding and now I can get pregnant, so I better be careful. And so, like many of you, I was left to figure this out on my own. And you know what? Even though I was in my late teens when I first had my sexual experience, it wasn't until I was 28 years old that I had my first orgasm. Real talk. And I'm being very, very transparent and vulnerable with you all here. I was married when I was 18 years old, and for 10 years, I had no clue what my body liked, what pleasure felt like, what real pleasure felt like, what felt good to me. Because of the way that I was raised, self-pleasure was forbidden. So how dare I even try to, explore my body to find out, right? That was what was instilled in me. And so as a result of that, I never really understood, honestly, how could what I choose to do with my body is, as long as it's not harming someone else, right? How could that be wrong? It's like gifting your child a beautiful present, but then telling him or her how and when they could use it, imposing boundaries on you. You can have this, it's yours, but this is how I want you to use it. And if you use it any other way, I'll take it back. And I know I'm going on a tangent here, that's not the point of this, but my point is that I grew up believing that my pleasure wasn't important, even in the context of a relationship, even in the context of me being married. It wasn't important. I believed that as long as my partner was pleased, it didn't matter how I felt, or that it was my partner's job to figure out or tell me what I liked. Okay. And I was frustrated as a result of that. I was unhappy as a result of that. I felt very unfulfilled as a woman in so many ways. It was very confusing for me, and if you're cringing as you're hearing me talk about this, I want you to just take a deep breath and count to 10 and stay with me. Okay. Don't tune it out because it makes you uncomfortable. We're all women here. And if this wasn't your experience, if you're watching and you're saying that's not me, then I say bravo. Good for you, sister. Because I can assure you that this is, or this has been the case with at least 90% of the women that I personally have spoken to. Many married women in their 30s, 40s, and up have not experienced that part of their womanhood. Okay. And so if you're wondering, what does this have to do with our kids? I think it has a lot to do with our kids. It has a lot to do with them, because our conversations with them about this beautiful and very natural part of our human experience has to start early, as soon as they start talking, in my opinion. Now, obviously, we don't want to talk to them about, the sexual act between a man and a woman or a couple when they're 3 years old. That's not what I'm suggesting. But there's so many different ways that I have found personally that I could build on that, even when my children, I started when they were like 3 or 4 years old, talking about their body parts, the right names for their body parts, the vagina, the vulva. My daughter knows her anatomy. I've had conversations with 10-year-old girls that think that their vulva and their urethra are the same body part. They think that their pee comes out of the same. I mean, that is, it's funny, but it's not funny at all. And so when we start having these conversations very early with our children, we're protecting them and we're empowering them. And we're building that foundation. You know, I started with, you know, referencing animal biology, how animals mate. When my daughter sees my horse trying to mount, you know, our other horse, our female horse, or when she sees the roosters with the chickens, that's a way of, you know, kind of building on that conversation. So that now my daughter is entering puberty and she's asking more direct questions, obviously, because her body's going through these changes. And we've had actually quite a few intense conversations, you know, on the subject. And they were approached with curiosity and wonder, not shame or guilt. And that's really what I am proposing. Okay, that's really what I'm proposing, that we shift the conversation. You know, when we start talking to our kids about this early, it becomes normal and less intense, or maybe less awkward, you know, as they get older and there's more at stake. Because we don't want to start talking to our kids about sexuality or what's healthy sexuality when they're 13 or 14 years old, because guess what? If they're in the public school system, you can be sure that they've already heard the twisted side of it. You see? So my point is that it has to go beyond focus on the consequences of risky behavior. It has to go beyond, you can't do this because you'll get pregnant or you get STDs. Because think about it, this is the message that they get from the health educators. They talk about the STDs, they talk about the unwanted pregnancies and all the other bad stuff, but it's still happening, right? We have the highest incidence of unwanted pregnancies, STDs among our young people. So obviously that's not helping. So then my question is, when do they get the good parts? Because they're being bombarded with the bad, the risk, the consequences. When do they get the good parts? When do they get to hear about why we enjoy doing it so much, right? Keeping it real, because we enjoy it. We enjoy intimacy with our partner. It feels good. It's amazing. Shouldn't they get that part from us too, as mothers or as parents? Shouldn't we tell them how beautiful it is when this is experienced in the context of a healthy, loving relationship, and how it's a basic human need that we all have, including them? You know, my daughter, a few months ago, I remember she asked me, we were in the bathroom, and she asked me what it felt like when I first kissed her daddy, when I first kissed my husband. She was like, Mama, what did that feel like? And I thought it was such a sweet question. And guess what? That question led to her asking about sexual intimacy, what it feels like. She wanted to know. And so we spent a whole hour talking about that. And obviously in the context of a loving relationship, she giggled a lot. And, you know, I giggled, and it was beautiful. And I say that because somehow as parents, we kind of like shy away from this conversation because we think that, yeah. It's so important, Leilani. And you know what I find? I find that somehow we take on a different viewpoint when it has to do with our boys than with our girls. You know, because for boys it's very common, you know, it's okay for boys to masturbate, or even if we don't feel comfortable with it, we kind of accept it, right? And we just kind of like, well, you know, that's what they do. But somehow when it comes to our girls, we don't take the time to educate them or even think that that's an important conversation or an important option for them. So it really reverts, like you just said, Leilani, it really reverts to what our hangups are. It really does. And that's why I think that this is such an important conversation. If this conversation, if you hearing me expressing this makes you feel uncomfortable, then I want you to dig deeper and find out why. What is it about this that you enjoy doing, but you can't express it to your children? That's what I'm trying to get at. We somehow think that if we talk to them about sex or the healthy part of it, that it's going to make them curious and it's going to make them want to do it. that they're going to want to do it. And actually, that's not true. That's a false belief, because statistics show that when children are educated about it, when they talk to their parents about it, when we keep those lines of communication open with them, they make better choices. They trust us. They feel like they can come to us with anything, including their sexuality. And you know, as mothers, I really believe that we are the builders of civilization. We are the foundation of everything that is. And so we have so much influence on our children's attitudes about sex, about relationships, much more than we realize, much more. You know, our children want us to talk to them. They want our guidance. You know, TV and social media may be sending you a different message. Oh, children don't want to talk to their parents about sex. Trust me, they do. They do. If you're giving it to them the way that it is, and you're not trying to, you know, keep them in this little box because it makes you feel safe, it makes you feel comfortable, they can see through the BS. They can see through the bullshit. They can see through it. And so that is a deterrent. But if you keep it honest and you keep it authentic and you share with them what your experience was, you know, within the context of what their age is and what they can handle, they're going to respect that. You know, they really want that from us. And they are so anxious and confused and unprepared. And I will say it's 90% because we are afraid to talk to them about it. It's because of they're following our signals. We really need to teach them by example that experiencing pleasure is about much more than just a sex act. It's about connecting, you know, with another human being. It's where our creativity flows from. It's, you know, part of our human expression just comes from that. It's natural. It's beautiful. So don't shy away from having this conversation with your children, and don't shy away from sharing your opinion here, because when we share our viewpoints, we learn from each other. Okay. And I want nothing more than for this platform to be something that you feel you can come to. And even if you don't agree with whatever I share or whatever is being expressed here, that you feel safe enough where you can, you know, give your opinion and it will be respected. So that's all I wanted to get off my chest today, because I just felt like, you know, I know that a lot of you saw the post, but I think only one person commented on it. And I don't want to read into that, you know, maybe no one had the time to comment, that's okay. But I just feel like my spirit was just kind of pushing me to just kind of express this, because I want to make sure that it's not because you all don't feel like this is something that's worthy of talking about, because believe me, it is. Our children, you know, they're getting so much information out there, and I would much rather my daughter get it from me than her going on the internet and finding a twisted, you know, insight on what a relationship looks like or what safe or healthy sex looks like. I would rather feel uncomfortable for 20 minutes and sharing that with her and making that impact in her, you know, journey, and also my son as well. I'm not just speaking for my daughter, I'm speaking for both, you know, because our boys and our girls need this. But I would rather be uncomfortable for that short time if I know that it's going to impart something so valuable to them, that now they're going to have a healthy perspective on, you know, what they can look forward to when they are old enough to manage that part of their life. But if we keep it from them until they're like 14, 15 years old, and then we feel like, oh, now's the time, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I can guarantee you, my children are not that old yet, but I can tell you from what I've witnessed that start young, start early. 3, 4 years old, start talking to them about their body, you know, empower them to know that their body belongs to them and they have the right to do whatever they want. If they, you know, if a 5-year-old is touching herself or touching himself, you know, I grew up with my mother smacking my hand. No, don't do that. That's wrong. Why is it wrong? It's no different than a baby playing with its ear or playing with your ear. You know how babies, when I used to nurse my son, he would be like, pulling at my other nipple. He wasn't doing it in a sexual way. It was irritating as hell because it just hurt, but I never in my mind thought this is inappropriate. You know what I mean? It's just what babies do. They're exploring. And so when we grow up with the no's, don't do that, don't touch yourself, then as we get older, we impose those limitations on ourselves and we feel some kind of way about expressing ourselves fully sexually. We don't feel comfortable with our partners. We don't feel like we can do this or that. And it's all because of what we've been conditioned to think. So it's a good conversation, and I hope we continue the conversation. Please share your comments with me. Thank you for sharing yours, Leilani. I love you and I appreciate that. It's just never too young to start with our kids. They need it. If we want to change the world, we need to change how we deal with our children, and because that is such a prevalent part of our human experience, everything is hypersexualized today, everything. It's an important part of our humanity. And if we don't give our children the right context, they're going to take what's out there. And that's what they're going to think is normal. So we really need to step up. I love you all. That's all I had to say. I'm going to go do my shopping now. I hope you all have a wonderful day, okay?